Almost 2 million years ago, a hominin crouched beside a fire. The species was Homo erectus. They had mastered flame, and they were cooking meat. For the next 1.99 million years, every meal they cooked was completely bland. Not a single pinch of flavor. The entire sensory universe of taste was locked inside the plants around them, untouched. Then something shifted. A hunter wrapped a cut of meat in the leaves of a wild bush before placing it into the embers. The leaf did not protect the meat from the ash. It released oils and aromatic compounds directly into the flesh. When that hunter unwrapped the package, the scent that rose was not cooked animal. It was something the human nose had never paired with food before. A complex, fragrant signal. The first recipe was an accident. But the leaf was doing something else to the meat, something that would keep that hunter alive. Plants cannot run from predators. They cannot flee from infection. Their only defense is to manufacture compounds that are toxic to microbes and insects. When that hunter wrapped meat in a fragrant leaf, the plant's defensive chemicals infused the flesh. The same compounds that protected the leaf from bacteria now protected the meat from rot. This was the first silent biological pact between your species and a plant. Your ancestors did not understand microbiology, but they understood consequences. Meat cooked with certain leaves did not make them sick the next day. Meat prepared with other plants tasted sharp and medicinal. Over generations, a profound knowledge accumulated without anyone writing it down. A specific bark could mask the taste of decay. A tiny seed could make a stew fiery. A root could turn bland grain into something golden and warm. The accidental discovery became a deliberate technology. But the question of how this happened is only half the story. The deeper mystery is why. Why did a specific set of plants become indispensable to a species that had survived nearly 2 million years without them? The standard explanation is a simple one. A hungry human tasted a fragrant leaf, found it pleasant, and a culinary tradition was born. This version of the story is so intuitive that it has gone unquestioned for centuries. It is also completely wrong. Your ancestors did not choose spices. They were coerced into a biological partnership by plants that could not run, hide, or fight. The aromatic compounds you call flavor are, in reality, antimicrobial toxins. When that hunter wrapped meat in a leaf, those toxins infused the flesh. The meat that tasted better was also the meat that did not kill. This was not a discovery of pleasure. It was a discovery of survival, made across thousands of generations. The practical problem was foodborne illness, a relentless killer in a world without refrigeration. Spices were not a luxury that made food taste good. They were a survival technology that happened to taste good. Your palate is a pathogen detector refined by evolution. But if spicing food were truly a human instinct, every culture on Earth would do it. They do not. In the 1950s, Cornell University anthropologist Allen Holmberg lived among the Siriono people of eastern Bolivia. He documented their food, their habits, their entire way of life. The Siriono did not use spices at all. They cooked their meat and fish plain, without a single aromatic leaf or seed. This was not a temporary omission, it was a complete absence of a practice you consider universal. Spicing food is not a human inevitability. It is a specific, non-obvious technology that some cultures adopted and others never did. Your ancestors who embraced it gained a silent, invisible advantage. The garlic mustard seed in a Danish hunter's pot, the turmeric on an Indus Valley hearth, the cinnamon in an Egyptian tomb. These were not garnishes. They were weapons against an enemy your ancestors could not see. But how do you know this pact was real? How do you know it was not folklore handed down and distorted across millennia? The answer lies in pottery shards, microscopic fossils, and the charred remains of 6,000-year-old meals. In 2013, archaeologist Hayley Saul and her team at the University of York's BioArCh Research Center published a study in the journal PLOS ONE. They had not been digging in the Fertile Crescents of Mesopotamia or the temple complexes of Egypt. They were analyzing charred food crusts, scraped from 6,000-year-old pottery shards found in Denmark and Germany. Inside those ancient carbonized residues, they found microscopic plant fossils called phytoliths. Phytoliths are silica deposits that form inside plant tissues. They survive fire, burial, and thousands of years of decomposition. They are the fingerprints a plant leaves behind long after the plant itself has turned to dust. The phytoliths belong to a single plant, garlic mustard, a small, unassuming weed with a sharp, peppery bite. The seeds contain no nutritional value. They provide no calories, no carbohydrates, no essential fats. They were not in the pot by accident. They were placed there deliberately, crushed and mixed with fish or deer meat, for one reason only: flavor. Before this discovery, archaeologists assumed prehistoric diets were driven entirely by the need for calories and energy. The idea that a Stone Age hunter would add a zero-calorie seed to a pot for the sake of taste seemed frivolous. Saul's phytolith analysis proved the opposite. 6,000 years ago, your ancestors were not surviving. They were cooking. This was not an isolated case. Archaeologists in Israel found the same pattern in pots of the same age. Thousands of miles to the east, in the ruins of the Indus Valley civilization, they found traces of turmeric, ginger, and garlic in cooking vessels dating back 5,000 years. 3 different continents. One shared, ancient, and deliberate behavior. The spicing of food was a global human project long before the first city was built. At sites like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, archaeologists recovered cooking pots with residues of turmeric, ginger, and garlic dating back to 3000 BCE. These are not wild plants randomly gathered. They are the exact same spices that define the cuisine of the Indian subcontinent today. The ginger in your kitchen and the ginger in a 5,000-year-old pot are chemically identical. This is not a historical footnote. This is an unbroken chain of flavor stretching across 5 millennia. The same molecules that flavored a Bronze Age meal are flavoring yours. Your ancestors did not discover spices and move on. They built entire culinary identities around them. Identities so powerful they survived the collapse of civilizations, the rise and fall of empires, and the complete transformation of every other aspect of human life. You are tasting a 5,000-year-old meal. It is a direct, molecular inheritance passed down through 200 generations. The same pattern appears in Egypt, but there the evidence points toward a mystery that remains unsolved. Cinnamon, a tree bark native to Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia, was found in Egyptian tombs from 2000 BCE. It traveled 3,000 miles before the invention of the wheeled cart in that region. A ghostly, forgotten trade network was already in place, built entirely on the human desire for the taste of a distant tree. The spice was not flavoring food alone, it was flavoring death itself. Egyptian embalmers used cinnamon and cassia to prepare bodies for the afterlife. The same aromatic compounds that preserved a pharaoh's flesh are the ones you sprinkle into your morning oatmeal. The boundary between the sacred and the culinary had not yet been drawn. This reverence for spice was not confined to Egypt. In ancient China, the legendary emperor Shen Nung compiled the first herbal encyclopedia around 2700 BCE. His Pensao Qing documented over 100 medicinal plants, including cassia, a cousin of cinnamon. In Mesopotamia, cuneiform tablets recorded the cultivation of bay, thyme, and coriander. Every civilization that encountered these aromatic plants elevated them from ingredients to objects of power, medicine, and ritual. But nothing illustrates their staggering value more than a single, violent moment in the year 410 of the Common Era. The Visigoth king Alaric stood at the gates of a terrified Rome. He had already sacked the city once. This time, he named his price. He did not demand gold. He did not demand silver or land. He demanded 5,000 pounds of pepper. A spice that now sits on your table for a few dollars was once the ransom of an empire. This staggering value was not irrational. It was a direct consequence of the biological pact made thousands of years earlier. The question of why spices were so precious has a name attached to its answer. Paul Sherman, an evolutionary biologist at Cornell University, and his student Jennifer Billing. In 1998, they published a study in the Quarterly Review of Biology that would reframe the entire history of flavor. They analyzed 4,578 meat-based recipes from traditional cookbooks spanning 36 countries. They tested 43 different spices against common foodborne bacteria, including E. coli, Salmonella, and Staphylococcus aureus. Every single one of the 30 spices they evaluated inhibited or killed at least some bacterial species. But 4 spices stood apart from the rest: garlic, onion, allspice, and oregano killed 100% of the bacterial species tested. 15 of the 43 spices killed at least 75%. Sherman and Billing found something else, a pattern hidden in geography. Countries with hotter climates, where food spoils faster, used significantly more spices per recipe than countries in cooler regions. The correlation was not subtle. It was overwhelming. The closer a country was to the equator, the more antimicrobial spices appeared in its traditional cooking. They tested and rejected every alternative explanation. Spices do not provide essential nutrition. They do not primarily serve to induce sweating for cooling. They do not mask the taste of spoiled food, because eating spoiled food will still make you ill regardless of the taste. The only explanation that survived scrutiny was antimicrobial defense. Your ancestors did not develop a taste for these flavors by chance. They survived because of them. A follow-up study confirmed the pattern from a different angle. Vegetable-based dishes, which spoil more slowly than meat, used significantly fewer spices. The food most vulnerable to bacterial colonization received the heaviest dose of chemical protection. This biological truth created the first global economy. The desire for these chemical weapons against rot would drive ships across uncharted oceans. It would connect civilizations that did not know the other existed. The Silk Road was not a single road. It was a web of caravan routes stretching from the Pacific coast of China to the Mediterranean Sea, a distance of over 4,000 miles. For centuries, the most precious cargo moving along its spine was not silk. It was spice. Cassia from China, pepper and ginger from India, cinnamon that had already traveled thousands of miles from Sri Lanka before it even reached the eastern terminus of the route. These were not casual exchanges. They were the engine of the first truly global economy, a system built entirely on dried plant matter. The overland routes were brutal and slow. A single journey could take years. The cost of transporting pepper from the Malabar coast of India to a Roman kitchen multiplied its value 100-fold. The spice that a Tamil farmer sold for a few coins was worth a soldier's monthly salary by the time it reached Alexandria. This expense was a tax paid to geography and to the Arab middlemen who controlled every choke point of the trade. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder, writing around 77 of the Common Era, was furious about it. In his Natural History, he complained that pepper was bought by weight, like gold or silver. He estimated that Rome was hemorrhaging at least 50 million sesterces every year to India, China, and Arabia for spices and luxury goods. An entire empire was bleeding wealth for the taste of a dried berry from the other side of the world. The Roman appetite for pepper was not a minor indulgence. The oldest surviving cookbook in Western history, a collection called Apicius, contains 468 recipes. 349 of them call for pepper. That is 75% of every dish in the book. Pepper was not a garnish in ancient Rome. It was the foundation of an entire cuisine. Then, in the year 40 of the Common Era, a Greek sailor named Hippolus made a discovery that rewrote the economic map of the ancient world. He realized the monsoon winds of the Indian Ocean were not chaotic. They blew reliably from the southwest in summer and from the northeast in winter. A ship could ride the wind one way, trade for months, and ride it back. The sea route to India was open. Roman ships began sailing directly to the Malabar coast, returning with holds full of pepper. The price plummeted in Rome, and its use exploded. Pepper was no longer reserved for the elite. Soldiers ate it, merchants ate it. The empire developed a hunger that could only be satisfied by a fleet of ships riding a wind that a Greek sailor had finally understood. But the story of the spice route is also a story of forgetting. The knowledge of the monsoon wind route, so precious and hard-won, vanished after the fall of the Roman Empire in the year 476. For 1,000 years, the sea path to India's pepper was lost to the west. The overland caravans returned. The Arab middlemen reclaimed their monopoly. The price of spice soared once more into the stratosphere, setting the stage for a new and violent age of exploration. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed west across the Atlantic. He was not searching for a new continent. He was searching for a faster route to the spice markets of India. He never found them. He found the Americas instead. But he was so convinced he had reached the Indies that he called the people he encountered Indians, a name that persists to this day. He brought back chili peppers and called them Indian pepper, believing they were a relative of the black pepper that had built empires. They were not. They were an entirely different plant from an entirely different continent. But they would conquer the world's kitchens even faster than their namesake. 6 years later, in 1498, the Portuguese navigator Vasco da Gama rounded the southern tip of Africa and reached Calicut on the Malabar coast of India. When asked what he had come for, he answered with 2 words: Christians and spices. The sea route that Rome had lost 1,000 years earlier was open again, and this time, the Europeans who found it would not let it go. The desire for pepper had already ransomed an empire. It had already built the first global economy. It had launched Columbus into the wrong hemisphere and da Gama around an entire continent. But the most profound consequence of this ancient biological pact was not economic. It was evolutionary. The spice did not change history alone. It changed you. The compounds that give spices their powerful taste, the ones that kill microbes, are chemical weapons: piperine in black pepper, capsaicin in chili, allicin in garlic. Your tongue detects them as irritants, as a mild poison. Your body's first reaction is to reject them. And yet, your brain floods with dopamine and endorphins when you taste them. You crave the very thing your body initially reads as a threat. This is not a paradox. It is the signature of an ancient evolutionary bargain. The capsaicin in a chili pepper did not evolve for you. It evolved to repel mammals. Mammals chew seeds and destroy them. The chili plant needed its fruit to be eaten only by birds. Birds lack the receptor that detects capsaicin. They eat the fruit, swallow the seeds whole, fly to a distant tree, and deposit those seeds intact in their droppings. The burn of a chili pepper is a mammal repellent designed to protect a seed dispersal system that was never meant to include you. Your body has a receptor called TRPV1. It is an ancient heat sensor embedded in your sensory neurons. It activates when tissue temperature exceeds 42 degrees Celsius, signaling your brain that you are being burned. Capsaicin binds to this same receptor. It tricks your nervous system into believing your mouth is on fire. No actual heat, no tissue damage. Your mouth is not tasting something delicious. It is screaming a warning that is not real. And yet, your brain responds by releasing a flood of endorphins, your body's own natural painkillers. It is a biological reward for enduring a chemical assault. Researchers call this response benign masochism, the human ability to derive pleasure from controlled, non-dangerous pain. The humans who craved these antimicrobial plants, who sought them out despite the burn, were the ones whose food was safer. They were the ones who survived the next bout of food poisoning. They were the ones who passed on their genes. Your love of pepper is not a preference. It is a survival instinct inherited from 1,000 generations who lived because they learned to love the burn. This is happening in your brain right now. The same neural circuitry that rewarded your ancestors for finding a life-saving spice is the circuitry that fires when you grind black pepper onto your meal. You are not choosing flavor. You are obeying a biological imperative that is 6,000 years old. This is the final, deepest layer of the ancient pact. The spices that were most lethal to microbes were also the ones that triggered the strongest reward response in your brain. Your ancestors who found this burning sensation compelling, who sought it out, who craved it, were the ones whose food was safest. They survived long enough to pass on their genes and their tastes. The spice did not flavor the meat alone. It saved the life of the person who ate it. That person is your ancestor. This biological imperative built your palate. But it raises one final, unsettling question. If this was such a powerful survival advantage, why did some humans abandon it entirely? The answer brings you back to the Siriono people of eastern Bolivia. In the 1950s, Cornell anthropologist Allen Holmberg documented a culture that cooked its food without a single spice. No leaves, no seeds, no bark. They had access to aromatic plants. They chose not to use them. Their food was fuel, not flavor. This single observation proves the deepest point of the entire story. The spicing of food was not a human inevitability. It was a specific, non-obvious technology that some of your ancestors adopted and others never did. The Siriono were not primitive. They were on the other side of a prehistoric fork in the road. The ancestors who took the other path, the ones who wrapped meat in fragrant leaves and dropped garlic mustard seeds into their pots, gained an invisible advantage. Their food harbored fewer pathogens. Their children survived more bouts of foodborne illness. Over thousands of generations, their taste buds became their first line of defense. The choice to spice food was a choice to survive. And the proof of that choice is still with you. The legal term peppercorn rent, still used in property law to describe a token payment, is a surviving echo from a time when a handful of peppercorns was worth enough to seal a contract. The word salary does not come from salt by coincidence. The word spice itself descends from the Latin species, meaning goods of special value. The language you speak still carries the memory of a world where dried plant matter was more precious than metal. Remember that hunter, nearly 2 million years ago, who first wrapped meat in a leaf? That was not the beginning of a culinary tradition. It was the beginning of a biological pact between a curious primate and a chemically armed plant. A pact that built empires, launched fleets across uncharted oceans, sent Columbus into the wrong hemisphere, and wired your brain to crave the burn of pepper. The story of spice is not a story of flavor. It is a story of survival written in the language of taste. Every bottle on your spice rack is a monument to 1,000,000 years of accidents, of risks taken by ancestors you will never know, of biological cunning so ancient it predates your species. You are not cooking. You are reenacting the oldest survival strategy on Earth. Your very existence is proof of which choice your ancestors made.